For this tutorial, we're creating an atmospheric landscape. I am wetting 1/3 of my 3x5 or 4x7 inch square that's already taped up. I'm using ultramarine blue, a wash brush, and I'm using the palette to create the lightest value. And I'm going directly across as a flat wash. I'm only wetting 1/3 so that the waterline will stop right there and it'll help with the drying time. I don't need to wet the entire thing. So I'm using a wash brush and I'm letting it dry. It doesn't have to be completely dry before you go into the next layer, but it should be somewhat dry. So I'm just giving a little touch on the edge to see how wet it is. Still too wet. As you can see, my fingerprint came right off of that. I'm using the side of my paper to test out values. This is just ultramarine blue with water. The back layer is going to have the lightest value. So I'm going to go in and do a mountain range. Mountain ranges are irregular, so they shouldn't just be triangles, but irregular shapes. And it's a little bit wet, so it's going to bleed a little bit into the background, and that will create a subtle feeling of fog. The next layer is going to be a little bit darker, and it's a hill that's going to be in front of this mountain range. There should be a total of about 6 values in this. So you can see I'm outlining it, filling it in pretty flat. Making sure that if I do go too dark, I can just add water and then spread it back out. And then my next hill range will come in front, and then there will be another one in front of that. So I'm just making a little note with my composition. So the next one in front of that hill is a value darker. So I'm testing it out again on the left side. And as the landscape gets closer to the viewer in the picture plane, we start to see more edges and details of these mountainous hills. The one in front that I'm doing right now, I have less water on my brush and more pigment. And I'm going to add more texture, so I'm not going to do a flat wash. I'm just going to go directly in and pick up my brush a few times to give it more of a texture of trees and mountain range. And the edges of that mountain will have irregular rough edges, because we want to create the illusion that that mountain is closer to us and we see more detail. Now, I don't have a black, so I'm using burnt umber and ultramarine blue together. I'm adding those colors so that I can get a darker blue. But if you have a black, you can use that certainly. So this hill right in front is a steep hill, and it is much darker because it's closer to us. So we see a few more values. We see a few more edges of tree line. Now I'm taking a smaller brush, a round, like say number 5, or something smaller even, and I'm starting at the bottom, and I'm delicately putting in tree trunks. So I'm being very, very delicate with this. I'm flicking my brush up from the bottom to the top. I'm trying to get slim tree trunks so that if I want to add more to them, I always can, but it's hard to remove at this point. And these trees will be in the very foreground of this landscape. When I'm adding the foliage on the trees, I'm doing really irregular brush strokes, because really we can see through a tree, so it shouldn't be all the same brushwork. It's almost like you're dabbing, but in a diagonal way. And then some of these trees will be further in the distance, so they'll be a little lighter in value. So you can let your watercolor sort of run out of color for some of these trees. So you can see the ones on the left side are really dark. So I loaded up my brush so that I could get a little darker in value. And I'm just going in and kind of tapping in a few little details of trees. That corner on the right feels like it should be darker. And this gives me a sense of space. Now, if your mountain became too light in the first pass and you want to go back in, you can just go back in. It's already dry, and you can re-sketch it back in with the light value. If you liked it washy and like very light, you can just leave it. It's just an option. The idea though is that very back mountain is going to be lighter. As you can see, everything starts moving forward.